Hey everybody, Bill Sky, the database guy, and we're going to do our first Mongo Python script in this video. Now, Python is the perfect language for Mongo databases because Python uses a lot of the same syntax as Mongo does with JSON documents. So trying to do it in Java is a little more difficult, well, quite a bit difficult, and doing it in C and C++ is nearly impossible. So the documentation for those lower level languages are very poor, and it's just a lot of questions on how you do it. And I attribute that to the fact that MongoDB is actually a pretty new database. You know, considering it's been around for a number of years, it still isn't quite there like a C++ or like a DB2 or a MySQL. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and set it up, do a couple of different commands, show you how to start coding. Now, the thing about this, though, is that you've got to have MongoDB all set up on your server or on your operating system, whether it's Windows or Mac or Linux, it doesn't really matter. The Python scripts are the same. So let's just go ahead and jump right in. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm in Linux. I'm going to go into my Python directory here. And I actually do have an application that I wrote that I'll demonstrate to you later. But I'm going to create a new one called first MongoDB, and from within there I'm just going to open up a terminal and I'm just going to use VI or Vim to actually write this code. And you can use any editor you want. You can create a file however you want to do it. I'm just going to say vim main.py, and let's go ahead and start coding. Now, Python is really easy to do Mongo coding simply because it does share a lot of the same characteristics as MongoDB. So the first thing you need to do is you need to say from pymongo import Mongo client. And I forgot to type the I. Okay. That is going to import everything you need from your Mongo development libraries that you previously installed if you watched the previous video, which, by the way, I do have a link to that in the description of this video. So the first thing that you need to do is you need to set up a client variable. Now the client variable is going to say, hey, I want to connect to this database, here's who I am, let's just go ahead and make the connection. It's much the same as any other database system. You have to connect to the database. You know, on other things like in Java, on MySQL, you have to load a driver. That's kind of what the from PyMongo does. It kind of loads the driver. And then we're going to create a variable. In this case, I'm going to call client. And then we have to put in the connection string. Now, the way that you do that is you say, I want to create a Mongo client object. And I'm going to put in the connection string. It's going to be MongoDB, your user ID. In this case, I believe I called mine root admin. Then you put in the password after a colon. I called mine the password. And since I have it installed on my local computer, I'm going to say localhost. The port, and the default is 27017. And then you put a slash, and then the database that's going to authenticate you. Now, I'm a little bit paranoid, so I'm going to go ahead and write that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up another terminal here, another tab. And there's my main.py, so I'm going to say python3 main.py. And I didn't get any kind of a dump. I didn't get any kind of a throw up of any type. Excuse that term. But it seems to have worked. But let's make absolutely sure. So once you create the client variable, now you actually want to do something with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to print. I'm going to say, hey, client, I want you to list all the databases names. And then I'm going to say client.close. Now, it's very important to close the client after you are done with it. Okay, so let's go ahead and write that. And I'm going to go over here to, and there we go. So what it did was it just returned a list of all the database names, in this case admin, config, employees, and local. So the connection was successful and it actually did the query. So that's the first thing. Just to make absolutely sure that your system is set up correctly, we just did a very, very simple connection to the client, and then we actually went ahead and printed off all the databases. Now, I do have a database out there, but let's go ahead and create a new one. Let's just go ahead and create a brand new database and insert some record. So it's not really a record, it's a document, it's a JSON document. So let's go ahead and let's insert some data into a collection that I actually have already defined in here. Now I could create a new collection, but let's go ahead and actually let's do that. Let's go ahead and create a new collection. All right, so in databases, what you'll be doing a lot of date and time stuff. So I'm going to say from date time, import date time. And then I want to actually connect to the database. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say database, and this is a brand new variable, database equals the client. I want to connect to the employee's database. So that's how you connect. You just say database equals the client, and the client was defined up here. And you say I want to connect to the employee's database. Now the employee's database is something I set up earlier using the MongoDB shell. You can do it from within the program if you like. I like to design the database outside of a program. However, you might want to actually create the database in the program, especially if the user doesn't have the database defined and you want to sell them your Python script or whatever, and then it'll create the database for them. But in this case, most of the time I like to put Mongo databases out on a server, so I'll create the database and then let people access it. So there you go. So that's going to connect us to the database. Now I'm going to go ahead and write that, and then I'm going to run it just to make sure it doesn't die. Okay, great. So we're on our way here. All right. So now the next thing I want to do is I want to insert a document into a collection. Now, before I can insert a document into a collection, I need to connect to the collection. So I'm going to say collection equals database, double quote, and I'm going to call this employee details. Okay. And now let's go over here and run it. Okay, things are looking good. Everything's looking good here. Okay. Now, you know something what I might do? Before I actually insert something into it, I want to make sure my connection is right. So I do have some data out there into that collection. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a try here. And I'm going to say, I'm going to create a cursor. Cursor equals the collection I just connected to, find. And I want to search on employee number. The employee 123. And I guess I could just leave it at that, or I could say that I want to display the ID, or I don't want to display the ID, so I'm going to say ID 0:0. That means don't display the ID. I want to display the last name, and I want to display the first name. And we're going to close off that bracket and parenthesis. So what is this saying? This is saying that I want to find a JSON document that has an employee number of 123, and these are the fields from that JSON document that I actually want to print. And the ID is the system generated, the Mongo generated ID for that particular database document. And when I put a :0, it means do not print that field. However, I do want to print I do want to print last name and first name. And the syntax on Mongo is pretty strict, so I'm going to make sure I put those spaces there. Okay. So now after I do that, then I want to say for record in cursor. So what's actually happening is when I do the find, all of the results go into the cursor variable. So I'm going to create a for loop here. I'm going to say for every record in cursor, what do I want to do? I want to print that record. And I'm going to end that for loop, and then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say I'm going to create an exception, except exception as E, print E. So it's going to try to do that. If there's an error, the script isn't just going to die because we put it in a try block, and then the exception will happen. Okay, so let's see if we're actually connecting to our, okay. Oh, name collection. I must not have named it right. So I called it collect. So let's change it to collection. This is why I like doing it. And here we go. So the very first one that we see here, that's the listing of our databases. So you might want to comment that out. That's the listing of our databases. And here is our query result. So there was some data in that database that I had previously inserted into the system. And now it just printed off the first name and the last name. Now, if I want to just print off the whole thing, I can just go in here. And actually, let me comment this out. I could say cursor equals collection.find and just specify the employee number and end the parentheses. So this will find all the employees that have employee number 1, 2, 3, and I'm not specifying what fields to print, what columns to print, and what columns not to print. So let's see how this looks different. So our data looks pretty out there, right? Because what it did was it just returned the entire JSON document to my cursor variable, and then I printed each record in the cursor variable, and you can see how it's really, really messy here. But that's the nature of learning new database systems. Okay, so I'm going to go up here and I'm going to comment out my print of databases, and I'm going to comment that out because I don't need that. I just put that in there to make sure I'm connecting to the Mongo database correctly. So there's that. Now let's go ahead and insert something. So I'm going to insert a document. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to say document to insert equals, and I'm going to open up a curly bracket, and within there I'm going to say employee number, I don't know, let's give it an employee number of 989898, just so it's something unique. I'm going to say first name is Kathy. I'm going to say last name is Tangania. I don't know where I came up with that. Just kind of trying to come up with an interesting name. Okay. And then I'm going to, now I want to put a hired on. So there's a hired on column in this database design. And I know I need date and time. So what I'm going to do is, let's make sure I put that up there. Yep, I did. So let's go ahead and create a variable called date time now equals date time now. And this is a Python construct, date time. So you have to make sure you say from date time, import date time. So I created that variable date time now, and I'm just going to say date time now. I have to make it to the date and time now. Now I could have put in a special string in there saying, you know, they were hired 2 weeks ago, but I just decided to do it just for right now. And I think that's all we want to do. So what we want to do is we want to close that off. Actually, let's go ahead and put in one more. I'm going to say married as if it matters to no. So Kathy's not married. Okay, so then we're going to go ahead and close off that insert. And I think that is pretty much it. I always like to close off my inserts that way. Okay, and then I'm going to say x equals collection.insert, and I'm going to insert one, doc insert. Now I could have put all of this inside of these parentheses right here, which I didn't do correctly, but instead I just put it in a variable. And you'll see why that, you'll see as you're coding this, that's actually a very good way of doing it. And I'm just going to say print x just to see how it printed, and let's see what happens now. All right, so let's go in here and let us run this. Okay, it looks like it inserted. And what is this output right here? This is the print of x. This is what is returned from the insert one. Now, if I want to see if that inserted, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here And actually, let's go ahead and I'm going to copy this after I do my insert. And I am going to just print, instead of 1, 2, 3, what did we call 989898? 989898. I'm just searching for that brand new employee that we just inserted. Now I don't want to insert it again, so I'm just going to put a bunch of comments there. Okay. All right, let's see if we find that record now. Okay, so, oh, I forgot to comment out the insert, so let's go ahead and comment that out as well. There we go. So here is our, that's our 1, 2, 3. And where's our 98989? Did that not insert correctly? Ah, here it is, right. Is that it? No, that's not it. Oh, here it is right here. Whew! That's why this is so difficult sometimes to debug. So you can see it right here. So there's Kathy Tangangnia. I'm not sure what that last name is. And that came from this commented out code. It's not super intuitive. You hear some people saying that MongoDB is so great because there's no SQL. Well, it's got its own language. Also, we have another problem here. And let me show you what that other problem is. I'm going to go ahead and go back over here to my test Mongo script. And I'm going to go ahead and open that in terminal. And I'm going to run my main.py file from there. So I'm going to say python3 main.py. Okay, so this is a little program that I wrote to go after my database, and I'm going to type all. All right, so let's go ahead and look at this. I've got a bunch of employees in here. It's a very much nicer formatted report. I'm going to show you how to do this in future videos. I'm going to type in 1, 2, 3 so you can see that Tammy Smith, they have 2 phone numbers, a home and a work phone number. Now I'm going to go ahead and look at that employee. So 9898, did I type it? 989898. And the program dies. And the reason that the program dies is because I did not, as a programmer, I did not write out the data to the Mongo database, that particular collection, employee details. I did not write it out exactly as it was supposed to be written. So the program, I didn't do what I was supposed to do in my code. So basically, I've broken this database because I did not follow the design that was previously created for this collection. Now, you might look at me and say, well, you're a crappy programmer. Why did you do that? Well, wouldn't it be nice if MongoDB told me as a programmer that I was not doing it correctly? That when I was inserting that JSON document for Kathy, I'm not going to even attempt that last name again, but wouldn't it be nice? That's what an SQL relational database management system does, is that it forces you to abide by that. And I'm going to go ahead here and I'm going to log in. All right, so I'm logged into my database, and let's go ahead and look at some data from within the Mongo shell. And I'm going to show you what I mean. So I'm going to say show databases, and there's my employees. I'm going to say use employees. I'm going to show collections. I'm going to say database.employee details.find. And let's take a look at our data here. Let me expand this a little bit. Okay, so here is a normal record or a normal document in this JSON or in this MongoDB collection called employee details. It has an employee number, last name, first name, hired on. Okay, so far we look okay. Employee number, first name, last name, hired on. It also has married, our new record. I don't have married on this one. Oops. Right now you're seeing problems with the data. This one right here, Sue Fillingham, she has married. She also has 2 phone numbers. But Jack down here is a home phone number. Jack down here also has a cell phone number. Susan doesn't have any kind of a label specifying what kind of phone numbers those are. So some other programmer wrote that document out there incorrectly. And if you look at the document that we just wrote, it doesn't have a phone number list at all. Nothing. Now, if I move up here, you can see that we have a problem with employee 555 as well. However, these are okay. This one right here, 888, that one's okay. And there's nothing in MongoDB that forces you to do that. It doesn't force you to abide to any kind of a design, which is the reason why I really, for programmers, it's not the best in the world. So if I go ahead and run this again and I list all, 1, 2, 3, that one is okay. 3, 4, 5, that one's okay. When it works, it's great. Now I'm going to type in 555 and it dies again because that record wasn't set up correctly. The document wasn't set up correctly. So, you know, there are some benefits to MongoDB, but there's a lot of negatives as well. And one of the main ones is that the programmer now is totally responsible to make sure that their data was inserted correctly and updated correctly in the documents. And if it's not, you can break the entire database. So I know I'm going to get some people that are going to argue with me about that. That's fine. I'm just telling you that's my experience with MongoDB. It's great for large, huge amounts of data, but it takes a lot of programming discipline to make sure that you've done it correctly. And there's some security issues with MongoDB, things like that. But that's our first Python program in MongoDB. Now, I don't mean to, tell you don't do anything in MongoDB. It's not worth your while. It is worth your while to learn that. It's always a good idea to learn new technologies. But people that are saying that it's no SQL, so it's better, that's not true. And again, people will argue with me about that. But SQL databases have been out there for a long, long time. MongoDB, JSON, document-based databases definitely have their place, but one isn't necessarily better than the other. It depends upon what it is that you're doing. If MongoDB is going to be used to collect huge amounts of data to store them in clear text, yes, perfectly great for that. But if you're going to be doing a lot of relationships, if you're going to be doing a lot of data validation, if you want to make absolutely sure that the programmer is guided along their development path, a relational database management system might be better. So anyway, different tools for different things. Hope to see you in our next video.